In the dark, damp chambers of medieval torture chambers, there existed an object so cruel, so horrifying, that its name alone sent shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it. It was the Pear of Anguish. At first glance, it appeared to be a harmless, almost innocent object. A pear-shaped piece of metal, its surface glistening coldly under the flickering torchlight, its spikes hidden inside like some cruel secret. But for the unfortunate souls who encountered it, this seemingly simple device was a nightmare unlike any other. The Pear of Anguish was not a device of quick death, wasn't a tool meant for execution, but rather for something far worse: embarrassment, hurt, and emotional wreckage. In the twisted minds of the Inquisitors, it was a perfect tool, an instrument designed not only to punish, but to break the will of its victims. It was designed to force confessions, but not through interrogation alone, no. The Inquisitors knew that the human body could endure far more than they could ever imagine. And with this device, they could break their victim's spirit, their mind, their dignity, long before they ever broke the body. The pear itself was a clever contraption, a solid, smooth metal object, shaped like a pear with an opening in the center, sharp spikes hidden inside. But the real horror of the device lay in how it was used. When a person was accused of heresy, witchcraft, or treason, they would be dragged before the authorities, their fate sealed before a crowd of onlookers. And among the weapons at the authorities' disposal, the Pear of Anguish was a tool of choice. It wasn't a device meant for a quick death or even physical mutilation. No, it was designed to destroy a person in a way that lasted. A person's dignity, their humanity, their very identity would be shattered in the most intimate way imaginable. The condemned would be stripped of their clothing, bound to a chair or a wooden post, their hands secured tightly behind them. They would often be left in the darkened chamber where the heavy air clung to their skin, making each breath feel thick, each heartbeat louder in the silence. And then, the torturers would approach with the pear. The device was forced into the body, the victim's most vulnerable orifices: the mouth, the vagina, or the anus. The choice of insertion depended on the whims of the torturers, the crime the victim was accused of, or simply the desire to inflict maximum suffering. The pear was cold to the touch as it was placed. The metal felt heavy against the skin, and the sharp tips of the spikes, hidden from sight, waited patiently to do their work. The torturer would then begin to twist the device, slowly, deliberately, causing the pear to open inside the body. With each twist, the sharp metal spikes spread out, digging deeper into the flesh. The pain was not immediate, but it was excruciating, as the victim felt each inch of the device slowly forcing its way further inside them. The spikes would tear and puncture, creating unimaginable agony as the metal spread, ripping through muscle and tissue. The process could take hours, sometimes days. For as long as the torturer wished, some victims would scream in agony, begging for mercy, while others remained silent, their bodies racked with pain so great they could no longer make a sound. The air in the chamber was thick with fear, the weight of the device's slow progress hanging in the air like a curse. But the Pear of Anguish wasn't just about the physical pain. It was a method of humiliation, a device meant to strip away a person's dignity in front of others. The public display was essential for its function. The device's twisted mechanism would open the victim's most private areas, exposing them to a crowd of witnesses. In some cases, entire towns or villages would gather to watch the torture, to see a person's body slowly destroyed, a grotesque display of power over a helpless individual. The pear didn't just break bodies, it broke spirits, leaving its victims emotionally and mentally scarred for life. The confessions it elicited were rarely truthful. They didn't need to be. The victim, desperate to stop the unbearable agony, would confess to anything: witchcraft, heresy, betrayal, whatever the Inquisitors wanted to hear. The pain was so overwhelming that it didn't matter whether they were guilty or innocent. All that mattered was escaping the torment. Some accounts suggest that after the confession, the torturers would leave the device inside the victim for longer, letting them experience the pain for as long as possible. Others claimed that the pear would be left inside, until the victim's body finally succumbed to the damage, their organs destroyed by the metal. It wasn't always about a quick death. It was about breaking a person in ways that couldn't be healed by time. The humiliation, physical trauma, the slow unraveling of the body, the devastating blow to the psyche. The Pear of Anguish wasn't just a tool for torture. It was a device of fear, a weapon that forced the accused into submission and kept the population terrified of what might happen to them if they were accused of a crime they didn't commit. For centuries, the Pear of Anguish has existed in a strange space between documented history and dark legend. Some historians argue it was a real device, born from the brutal creativity of medieval torturers. Others believe it may have been an invention of later centuries, a symbolic story designed to portray the cruelty of inquisitors. But regardless of which theory is true, the fear it inspired was very real. To understand the Pear, we must understand the world that created it. The Middle Ages were dominated by fear. Fear of heresy, fear of witchcraft, fear of rebellion, fear of anything that challenged the authority of the church or the crown. Most people could not read or write. Knowledge came from stories, rumors, and the terrifying whispers shared between villagers. When an inquisitor arrived in town, people stayed behind closed doors. Just the sight of an official seal, the sound of marching boots, or the shadow of a hooded figure was enough to make entire communities tremble. It was in this environment that torture flourished. Pain was believed to bring purity. Suffering was seen as a path to truth. In reality, torture rarely revealed truth. It revealed desperation. But that didn't matter. What mattered was control. What mattered was fear. The Pear of Anguish fit perfectly into this system. It was small enough to be carried icily, simple enough that any torturer could use it, and brutal enough that no one who saw it ever forgot it. A tool of humiliation, a weapon of dominance, and a silent reminder of what awaited those who dared to resist authority. There were different versions of the device. Some accounts described 3 metal petals that opened outward when twisted. Others mentioned 4. A few claim there were spikes inside, while others insist the spikes were added only in later centuries to enhance its terrifying reputation. But regardless of its exact form, the purpose remained the same: to destroy dignity, to create fear, to force obedience. It was used in several ways, each darker than the last. 1. The oral pear forced into the mouth of someone accused of lying, blasphemy, or speaking against the church. As it opened, it would tear the jaw, damage the teeth, and leave the victim unable to speak properly again. 2. The vaginal pear used on women accused of witchcraft, adultery, or giving birth to an illegitimate child. Its purpose was humiliation, pain, and the destruction of the reproductive organs. 3. The anal pear usually used on men accused of homosexuality, treason, or crimes against the ruling class. Each version targeted a different fear, a different form of shame. The physical pain was only half the suffering. The humiliation was the rest. Across Europe, small towns whispered about it. People spoke of the pear in hushed voices. Parents warned their children to behave, reminding them of the device that could tear them apart from the inside. And even if most villagers never saw the actual mechanism, the fear it created was powerful enough to keep entire communities obedient. Some inquisitors documented their use of torture tools in strict, detailed logs. Others kept no records, knowing that secrecy made fear even stronger. Because what people imagine in the dark is often worse than the truth. In many places, the pear became a symbol, a weapon that didn't need to be used often because its reputation alone kept people terrified. A woman falsely accused of witchcraft might confess the moment she saw the device. A man suspected of treason might give up names before the torturer even approached him. The device's power lay not only in what it did, but in what people thought it could do. The Pear of Anguish became the perfect tool for a world ruled by fear. But there is another side to its history, a darker possibility. A theory that makes the device even more disturbing. Some historians believe that the pear wasn't merely a physical tool of torture, but also a symbolic device created by later generations to represent the horrors of past authorities. A visual metaphor for humiliation, pain, and the intrusion into a person's most private space. Whether real or metaphorical, one thing is clear. The human mind is capable of imagining cruelty far beyond what most people can comprehend. As centuries passed, the pear began appearing in private collections, museums, and curiosity cabinets. Each version slightly different, each claiming to be authentic. Travelers wrote about it in journals. Merchants sold replicas to wealthy collectors. Historians debated its origins, its purpose, and its use. But for the victims, for the men and women who suffered under the threat of the Inquisition, debates did not matter. The fear was real, the humiliation was real, the torture was real. Pear of Anguish, whether used frequently or only in rare cases, became a symbol of a world that believed pain was a path to truth and humiliation was a legitimate tool of justice. It represented a time when a simple accusation could destroy a life, a time when torture was a public performance, a time when the human body was nothing more than a canvas for cruelty. And in the darkest corners of Europe, people still whispered about it, the cold metal pear that opened inside your body, ripping you apart from the inside out. This was not just a device, it was a message that said, your body belongs to us. By the time a victim reached the final stage of their suffering, their body was already shaking, their breathing shallow, their mind drifting somewhere between pain and fading consciousness. The Pear of Anguish did not kill quickly. It was never designed for speed. Its true cruelty emerged slowly, inch by inch, twist by twist, as the metal petals expanded inside the body. When the torturer performed the final turns of the screw, the spikes inside the device drove deeper into the torn flesh. Muscle fibers split, internal tissue ruptured. Pain unlike anything the human body was meant to endure radiated outward from the victim's core. Yet the chamber remained quiet, too quiet. The greatest cruelty of medieval torture was that suffering happened in silence. Inside thick stone walls, hidden beneath monasteries, castles, and small-town execution rooms, the screams rarely escaped. Inside the torture chamber, torches flickered against walls stained by years of suffering. The floor smelled of damp stone and cold iron. Ropes tightened against the victim's wrists, pulling their arms backward, forcing their body to remain still as the device did its work. No one knew exactly what went through a victim's mind during the final minutes of the Pear's expansion. Some cried for help that would never come. Some prayed desperately, begging for forgiveness. Others fell silent, their faces frozen in agony as their body began to shut down. The torturer would watch, not with shock, not with guilt, but with the same cold discipline. As a blacksmith watching iron melt under flame, for them it was routine. They believed they were instruments of justice, tools of order, enforcers of purity. The victim's pain was just another step in the process. When the expansion reached its maximum width, some victims lost consciousness immediately, their bodies collapsing forward as their organs began to fail. Others remained awake, their minds trapped in a final, unbearable moment before everything went dark. But death was not always the end. In some cases, the torturer would remove the device not to offer mercy, but to inflict more suffering. The metal, slick with blood, would be placed back into cold water, washed briefly, and then prepared for the next confession attempt. A single pear might be used on dozens of victims. Each twist defined someone's last moment. Each expansion destroyed another life. And yet the world outside the chamber continued on without pause. Merchants sold wool and bread in the streets. Children played in muddy alleyways. Priests delivered sermons about purity, obedience, and sin. People lived their ordinary lives mere meters away from unimaginable agony. It was this contrast, the normalcy outside, and the horror inside, that made medieval torture so chilling. The Pear of Anguish did not exist in a world separate from daily life. It existed within it, and that is what made it so terrifying. The final message of the pear in the end, the Pear of Anguish, leaves us with one final, haunting thought. Torture is not just about pain. It is about control. It is about breaking the human spirit from the inside, just like the device itself. The metal petals opened outward, tearing the body apart, while fear opened inward, destroying the soul. And for the victims, their final moments were not defined by the device alone, but by the terrible silence that surrounded them. A silence that carried their suffering into the pages of history. A silence still echoing today whenever we speak the name, the Pear of Anguish.